fellow friends and neighbors. My name is Bob Kalashevsky. I was at 698 Washington Street, Harbor for 49 years. I serve on the Lakeview Cemetery Board representing the city of Harbor Springs with Richard Schiller from Little Traverse Township and Bob Sadler from West Traverse Township, who we are on the cemetery board. Our staff is John Weber, as sexton is retiring at the end of this year. We have a new man on board. I'll explain it a little bit. Gunnar Brainerd will be taking his place. John Peters is groundskeeper. Our tax base for 2023 was just under $1,100,000. Our revenues budgeted were $239,600, but we came in at $28,000 over revenue. Our expenses were $217,000, almost $218,000. We came in at $27,000 under. And mostly due to increased grave openings and lot sales. We generally set grave openings and lot sales where we thought they would be on an average, and we've always exceeded those, so that helps. Total assets of the cemetery are currently at $379,000. Our fund balance is $318,000, which is $55,000 over what we budgeted. The statement from the auditors was increased revenues are due to grave openings and sale of lots, and especially the excellent expense control by the cemetery staff. I want to make sure that we understand the cemetery staff is responsible for making us look as good as we do. So on the cemetery itself, we have a new fence finished. It's kind of A configuration. There's two horizontal pieces with a top and then a configuration. We opted to do that in relationship to woven wire and such because the expense of the material, the expense of doing the work, the expense associated with getting new poles and everything else, we just decided to do what we did. And I think it looks pretty good. We have an excellent staff. The only new things we're looking at is we're looking at probably purchasing a new mower next year, and we have the funds to do that. I'm always hearing from people that when they visit the cemetery, they like the way it's kept up, and we make sure that the staff knows that. So right now the cemetery is looking good. As I said, John Weber's been there like 22 years, but Gunnar has had an extensive experience in groundskeeping and such. So we hired him in April to work alongside John to learn what he needed to learn to be able to then step into John's shoes. And he's been doing a really good job. So, any particular questions? Well, I would tell you then that as I do every year, the cemetery is in extremely good shape financially, and physically is the way it's presented. And we have, the only new thing is that Holy Childhood has a maintenance agreement with Lakeview. Lakeview takes care of Holy Childhood in terms of the lawn cutting and all that sort of stuff. And we pay 1/3 of the water of the cemetery for Holy Childhood. And that contract is up this year. And that will be renewed. We sent that to Father Roman here pretty quick. And we'll get that done. So, R.O. McGarrett, that's my report for the cemetery.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Good job.
We'll be back next fall. Okay, item 3B is a quarterly budget update. Council had requested a more regular budget updates just so before we head into budget season, there's more understanding of where we are at with the budget and where we might be going. City Clerk Nick Whitaker prepared the following documents. You see the attachments for each of the major funds. We didn't include the fire fund and the historical fund at this time, and we could in the future. It's just they're so small. Fire department is a little wonkier, that we just figured these were the main ones that really mattered at this point. And so I created this chart based on Nick's work showing where we are at to date with revenue and where we are at to date with expenditures, and I put some notes with any significant reasons why we may have be up or down or different than what we anticipated. As a rough guide, we are 9 months into the fiscal year. And so technically that's 3/4 of the year. We should technically be about 75% of our expenditures and revenue. Now, that's not always going to be true because sometimes we don't do big projects until the end of the year. Sometimes we don't get some revenue in, later, but generally speaking, we want to be around there. And Nick, if you want to interrupt me or stop me at any time, just let me know. But so with the general fund, we are 107% for revenue. So and part of this is because we tend to budget a little conservatively when it comes to revenue. So just in case we aren't where we expect to be at, but we're a little above where we expected to be for revenue, and we probably still have some more revenue to come in by the end of the year. So I would expect that to increase, which is a good thing. Expenditures in the general fund, we're at 74%, which is right about where we should be. One of the things to note is our skate park expenses were higher than budgeted because they relate to landscaping, concrete, fence painting, but what we don't see is the donations in the previous year had covered part of these expenses. So sometimes that happens, we get donations in one year and they count as revenue, and then we don't have those expenses until next year. And that happened with the skate park. That's also happened with the boardwalk. So we feel really good about the general fund. Major streets, revenue at 67%, expenditures at 42%. I expect we'll be pretty close by the end of the year with everything there. And sometimes also to note, sometimes we haven't made all our payments yet. So for example, for expenditures, we might have received the bill, or we haven't been billed yet for work that's been done a month or 2 months ago, and those bills will go out. So just not captured here yet. So those expenditures percentages will increase. Revenue for local streets, 94%, and expenditures at 91%. Street construction is where the increase in the expenditures was for local streets, and that's because of Judd Hill project cost that was higher when we received our bids not by a lot than we anticipated. But we will also be reclassifying some of the expenditures for that Judd Hill project to sidewalk line, because we only spent about $8,000 or $9,000 in our sidewalk, and we should be spending between $30,000 and $35,000 a year. We decided to only do one small sidewalk project this year, and then the Judd Hill sidewalk replacement was the other sidewalk project. So we're going to see a shift in that money. So we're pretty good and comfortable where we're at there. Electric fund, 64% for revenue, 57% for expenditures. Cost of labor is up because that cost of labor classification is labor that our electric department guys do for new hookups and transfers at new homes or new businesses, and we've had more of those this year. Those are something we do bill out and then get revenue for. So they cancel each other out. We just haven't sent all those bills out yet, but that will show up in revenue. But yes, we've had more hookups and transformers going in houses. Water and sewer, we're just at 69% for revenue and 66% for expenditures. The line item where you see a significant increase is the mains maintenance, and that's because the water main on 3rd Street and State, there was a major leak there, so there was a major work we had to do in replacing and repairing that water main. So that was an emergency situation where we had to spend more money than we normally would for that line item. And that was in probably this spring, I think. Yeah. Waterfront, we're really comfortable, 95% revenue. The season's essentially over, so we're not going to anticipate much more revenue. We'll still have some coming in, but for the most part, that's waterfront revenue, and expenditures are at 62%. And I don't think that'll increase a whole lot either. Equipment fund, same deal, 86% for revenue, 83% expenditures, no significant variations in what we expected. So overall, I think this was a good practice for Nick and I, because it makes actually things going in budget season a little easier. But I think it's also helpful to see that we are on track, that we are within range of where we should be for our funds. So I guess the only question really Nick and I had for you is this something that's what you were thinking about when you wanted to see a quarterly budget update, or was there anything else you wanted to see?
Actually, I think this is great. I mean, I looked it over today, and I thought there was a lot of really good information. I really appreciate Nick's time in putting this together. And I know it's gonna help me anyway when we start to look at the budget because there are some significant items. The fact that our general fund revenues are higher than we anticipated them to be is a really good thing. And even though some of the expenditures were up, like the Judd Hill construction and like the skate park, you know, I think those don't seem unreasonable. So I felt really good. I wanted to. There was only one expenditure that I talked to Nick about, which is fairly small, under the water and sewer fund, under the service lines. We've expended more of our money, more than our budget so far this year. And it said a lot of that cost has to do with the lead detection that we have to do, and that's required by the county or the state? The state, okay. So I'm glad to know that that's something that we're working on. And the other item that we, under water and sewer that we talked about in the last couple of months was we had to approve an additional expenditure for something on Page Hill.
Oh, yeah, the sewer
Something, so, and that shows in here, so that's essentially why we're over budget there, so. I thank you very much, this is great. I don't know if anybody else had any other questions.
It was really helpful, I think, to have the different funds, a general look at them, a bird's eye look at them, you know, or that 300-foot view. The notes in particular are really helpful, you know, to kind of get a general idea of why a fund might be over a little bit in terms of revenue or over or under in terms of the expenditures. I really liked that. That was very helpful then to take that further and dig a little bit deeper into the individual funds and line items. This was, as Kathy mentioned, this was extremely helpful. And I understand it was a lot, you know, a lot of work to put this together, but thank you for doing it.
Certainly.
But that's the thing, once we have a template now going forward, it's gonna be easier for each quarterly update now that we know.
Well, and I think, I really appreciate those comments too, such as, this was a good exercise to go through because, maybe, you kind of have a feel that, yeah, things are going as planned. We had some overages in some areas, but going through that exercise, I agree. I think it's a good thing to do, and but thank you with everything going on in election season and all that, Nick. Thank you.
I think it's helpful. It's nice to not wait the whole year to take a look at it.
You'll be able to do this quarterly, do you think, during the year?
Yeah, so I think we'll have the budget approved for January, so obviously there would be no, but in April and then in July or whatever, every 3 months. So I think that'd be good.
Okay, that's great.
Public comment?
Any public comment on our budgeting?
Item 3C, Bluff Stability Committee recommendations. So the Bluff Stability Committee, and thank you, Kathy, for calling me to remind me to tell remind the council and the public who is on the Bluff Stability Committee. In the notes, it's only the first names. So the Bluff Stability Committee was appointed by council, created a Bluff Stability Committee in January, and then by the time we appointed it in late March, there was 8 members. There was a mayor, Matt Bagara, DPW director, Lucas Vanderzee, and then we had 6 residents, Linda Rockowitz, Gretchen LaMarche, Debbie Taggart, Gail Stevens, Robert Brown, and Peggy Aboud. So most of these individuals had not been on any board or commission before. So it was a good mix of People above the bluff, below the bluff, and people who have been involved and haven't been involved. So, their primary task was to investigate bluff stability issues, devise best practices to address those issues. And the primary concerns were related to runoff and vegetation management. And specifically, they were looking at private property because we don't regulate vegetation management on private property on the bluff. What we do regulate is building, so of what you can build and can't build on the bluff, and you can't dump, debris and things. So we do have some regulations for the bluff, but we don't have vegetation management. And vegetation management, removal of trees, et cetera, was a concern by some people, and so was runoff. So committee met 7 times. They did review a lot of information, and they discussed expert opinions. We had some experts come in. And over the course of this time, the committee put together the attached best practice guidelines, which they suggest should be placed on the website and in ways distributed or to residents on the bluff, below the bluff, or at least have them be aware that there are these best practice guidelines. So the intent was not for this to be an ordinance or a rule, but to really strongly encourage residents to review these guidelines and apply them. As you say, it's probably read in the bluff in the recommendations, the guidelines. Neighborliness was one of the topics that the committee focused on. Is like just even though you don't have to, but letting your neighbor know what's going on with the bluff, especially those that are below the bluff, and it can solve a lot of problems before they become problems. So the bluff, the guidelines as presented, there is some discussion about the process, but a lot of the guidelines focus on, as I mentioned, communication, collaboration. But when it comes to specifically vegetation management, they talk about when tree removal should be employed and how, and they really focus on removing trees if they're dead and diseased, and or dangerous trees, which there are plenty, and that could help open up things for lower canopy. They talk about tree topping, how that's one of probably the worst things you can do for the tree, and not just the tree, but also the bluff and the view. Talked about tree trimming and pruning standards, what trees could be used for plantings, and then talked a little bit about how slope may or may affect vegetation management. But they didn't get too involved in analyzing different slopes and the different parts of the bluff because they didn't feel like the vegetation management practices would really differ too much, but that it might be good for property owners to understand that slope could be a factor in things like runoff and other things like that. So then they go in a little bit about how the city vegetation on city property is different than there's different rules governing that than there are for private property. And then there's the appendix here that talks about plantings and et cetera. So that is the committee. I did attach some of the notes just so council has some background history on the process going through that. But I think it was pretty successful. I mean, there's not a board of experts, but they did pay attention to experts. They did review expert material, and that's how all policy is made in the city. As you all aren't experts on a lot of the topics that you have to approve, but you do have to approve it because you're elected representatives. So you do have to take the input from them. So our Bluff Stability Committee did that, and they're making their recommendations to you with these guidelines. So we would need, if council is okay with them, is to essentially approve the city using and distributing these guidelines. Not an ordinance, not law, but encouraging and promoting these as guidelines for residents to follow.
Excuse me, was the committee person gonna have anything to say?
one?
No.
Matt?
Oh, yeah, other than Matt, oh, I was sorry, I was looking at Linda. Apologize.
Oh yeah, well, Linda is the one who kind of threw out the idea originally.
I was, yes.
It's her brainchild.
Well, it was really great. I mean, we had wonderful discussions. We all learned a lot. And I've already found it useful. My neighbors above us, some of our trees on our property are really blocking a view. And so when he came and said, you know, what can we do? And said, can we top those? I could say no. And based on expert opinion, not just my own, and say, you know, sure, let's see what we can work together and do. And I learned a lot about what to do. So it did all that I hoped it would do.
Yeah, no, it was a good exercise. We had public comment from people above and below the bluff. It was helpful. I think we came up with a pretty good plan. People choose to use it. And that'll be the big thing, is getting people to choose to use our advice versus what they're used to. So,
I appreciated you doing it. Because I thought it was a good model to try to come up with recommendations like this rather than ordinances and all of that. Let's see if it works. I think it can. And I know it took some time, so thanks for doing it.
I also like the spirit of collaboration and, letting the citizens really weigh in on it, and particularly the emphasis on neighborliness. And one of the points in the memo or recommendation is that residents on Third Street and Bluff Drive who own or abut Bluff property should be made aware of the document's existence as well. So how would that be done? How will we get this out there to them in particular?
They discussed a few ways. One is perhaps a direct mailing, just not of the, maybe the not entire guidelines, but short page with a link to where they can find the guidelines. And over time, the one thing that may be difficult is, when new property owners come in and out, you would think that maybe find ways to know when a house is sold so that you can, regularly update a person that, oh, there are these best guidelines. So that's something we really haven't worked out clearly, but at least mailing, having them available on the website, occasionally, reminding the public about them. So it's more of just not letting it just sit on the shelf and then forgetting about it. So we're just trying to keep it active.
Will the actual recommendation page be, kind of formatted in a nice way and placed as a PDF so that somebody could print it out? Or
Imagine we would have, I've been thinking about where to put it on our website. I mean, we do have sections on vegetation management, and so perhaps putting a section there with a link to the PDF, but some of that, there are still some things up that we have to kind of clean on our website, so I have to go through our website and kind of reorganize things probably, but yes, that's the goal.
any public comment? Everyone happy with the best practices?
I think it sounds great.
We can probably approve this one by consensus.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
Good.
Good job.
All right, next item is 3D, and that is the planning commission's opinion on the State Street infrastructure project and the East Bluff road configuration. So in August, city staff introduced the State Street infrastructure project to council. The primary purpose of it was to replace the aging water lines and stormwater lines, which are from the 1950s, and this is on State Street between Summit and M119. And also to replace the road surface. That's kind of what kicked off this conversation originally. And if we were going to replace the road surface, it makes sense to replace 70-year-old water infrastructure. But the plan also included a couple of things that we wanted planning commission opinion on. One was to narrow State Street in order to reduce water flow. Another one was to regrade the right-of-way just east of the state and M119 intersection to improve visibility for vehicles turning. And then as a result of that, to turn East Bluff Drive into a one-way street. Council asked planning commission's input on those latter three issues. Planning commission had I wasn't there, but I listened to the meeting, had a long and healthy discussion on it. And their opinion is to narrow State Street as recommended and to regrade the road, but to keep East Bluff Drive a two-way street. And our engineers say it is possible to narrow it, but still keep it as a two-way street. And then they said if in the future, conditions, develop where we think that, it's dangerous or needs to be relooked at, then we can relook at making it a right turn only perhaps, but at this point, they didn't see any need for that, so. That is their recommendation, well, I would say that is their opinion. To narrow State Street as presented, regrade the road, and then keep East Bluff Drive a two-way street. So I think council's role here is just because we want to get going with this project, at least to bid it out, so we eventually have a 2025 construction on it. If council is okay with the project presented to approve it and authorize to prepare final plans, go out to bid. But if you do approve it, just keep in mind that you would be approving it for the budget next year, approximately $600,000, $615,000, I forget the final figure was.
Do you have any public comment?
You're talking about State Street from the Bluff Drive to Summit? That's
Yes.
on the hill?
Yes, not all, yeah, not to Snyder, to the lake, just to south. Yeah,
Okay.
Pam Tarchinsky, 465 State Street. So I went to the planning commission conversation about these ideas, and the one thing that wasn't clear to me at that time was where this roughly 4 feet was going to come from. So if it comes from one side or the other, that's going to mean the opposite side is going to have traffic much closer to its building, its house than the other one. Somebody would gain some space from the traffic, another would lose some space. So as long as I guess it would be the center line remains where the center line is. So whatever narrowing takes place equally. So the houses might actually be gaining a little bit of green space. That'd be great. But just so the trucks don't get shoved closer to.
Lucas said it was going to,
Or them.
Lucas said it was going to come off equally on both sides.
Yeah, that wasn't clear when I was there, so that's why I wanted to
Yeah,
ask.
that's what-
Yeah.
I could go back and listen again.
It is
but-
on right now, so
Okay,
but yeah.
Lucas, if you want to respond to that, is it gonna be equally from both sides?
Yeah, center line does stay where it is, and it will be equal distance. The curbs will move in, the same on both sides.
Okay, and can we plant trees in it then? Because right now it's too narrow to plant trees and a little bit under the power lines or maybe phone lines. Can we add some greenery to it?
That's something we could discuss, yeah.
Because if we could turn it more into a neighborhood character and cooling trees would be nicer in many ways and maybe quieter. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. What else? Linda?
Lisa Nichols, 38 West Bluff Drive. I walk that East Bluff all the time, and so keeping it two-way is really good. But I was kind of wondering, like on the corner, when you get to State, is there a way we could try like a mirror? Because sometimes it's hard to see the cars that are coming up. And if we could have maybe a mirror and try it, we could maybe see what's coming up. Because a couple of times I've started across, but I'm always like this. I guess they're coming up
So you
there.
could see it.
So it's just a thought, but I do think we should keep it two-way.
Thank you. We have Chief Knight. I don't know, Chief, if you have any comments on that.
A couple of things is I believe the intersection is gonna be a little bit further to the west. And I believe Lucas's plan is gonna shave part of the hill off, which will help a little bit as well. And then we talked about maybe like if 131 and 31, where they have this white dotted line to try to keep traffic in their lanes as you're turning left. Let's say you're coming eastbound on 31, you turn left on 131, you know how that dotted line sort of steers you where you should go. And I think that those things will aid it in that turn.
Thanks, Chief.
Mulder.
Bill Mulder, 372 West Summit Street, and I was on the planning commission in that discussion. And there was just one extra strong suggestion the planning commission had, and that was to, if budget allows, take the concrete paving service farther up the hill, or as far as possible up the hill to prevent future wrinkling and waffling, and save some money in the long run.
Thanks.
And one other thing Lucas mentioned in the planning commission was, if we do narrow State Street, it will allow us to bury a conduit. So that if we do end up burying lines, it will already be there. that make
Yeah.
sense? I mean, that made good sense.
Yep.
I'm a little concerned about narrowing of it just because of the crashes that we've had. Have all been winter related and just people slide into each other, but it should work. Just that's my biggest concern. We've had, I don't know if I explained it, I think I did at the last council meeting. We had 18 crashes there, 12 of them were the result of snow and ice. And I'm just concerned about semis coming up the hill, turning right onto State Street, turning right onto State Street, they have to make that corner when it's there. But Lucas assured me it shouldn't be a problem, but that's my biggest concern. I agree with keeping it two-way, but that's my biggest concern.
Anyone else?
Did, so would East Bluff, even though it's gonna remain two-way, is that gonna be narrowed in order to achieve the regrading of that hill, Lucas? Or, you know, because we're keeping
It
it
is.
two-way.
It is gonna be narrow.
Okay, all right, and with that, you do think that we'll be able to regrade that hill a little bit then, correct?
Yeah, with the two-way design, the street is narrowed. Not as much, but it's fairly close. We didn't do any shifting on the north side of the street in the two-way design. But yeah, we can still make it significantly more narrow and do some good regrading
Okay.
there for, yes.
All right, I was under the impression first that that was to get it narrow enough, making it one way, but it would have to be one way, so that's why I asked, so we can still then get it narrow enough to regrade that hill a little bit and keep it two ways. Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment? Comment?
I have the same question. I have one more question, sorry. I have the same question that I asked at the planning meeting. At Kyle, we talked about this. I still don't. This is the drawing of what we're talking about, right? So if somebody is coming westbound on East Bluff and they make a left turn, what did you do?
I'm showing that was the
Okay.
removals. I think. This was, yeah.
Okay, so there's gonna be lines and directions like you mentioned and so the person can actually come out all the way to State Street and make the hard left, so they're sitting there and then make the left down the hill?
I don't know if it'll work,
Because I looked at it the other day and I was having a hard time picturing it.
So the one thing I believe is we're narrowing, that we're pushing this is the north end, like Lucas said, it's still gonna be the same. We're narrowing this, you can see this sort of the jog. And this is actually, if I understand it correct, is wide enough right now for 3 cars. It'll be narrowed down to 2 cars. So it's gonna push everybody this way a little bit. And when I talk about that dotted line, and I don't know if it'll work, but hopefully it will, that we could take that dotted line, like, let's say you're coming, I think you're saying you're coming this way.
Yes.
Yep, and there would be like a dotted line to sort of signify when you make that turn, it's not gonna make you have to go, but it's gonna be a suggestion. Like they do over there when two lanes are turning left onto 31, like it's sort of, you follow that, and that way you're not bumping into the car and either side line.
Okay.
I think that may assist, or at least a line sort of starting out in an intersection, say this is the way you're supposed to
So
go.
then the left turn wouldn't be cut any closer than that. It should come out more to the
Yeah,
center of
because if you
State.
see, I think this is existing one, if you see,
Okay.
we're sort of shoving that corner this way a little bit as well, to the west.
Okay.
So it should make you,
Oh, okay.
this is the current, so it's really easy right now to go like that. This, you'll have to come out a little bit more, it'll be, it's hard to say without being there, like without having it done.
Right.
But my goal would be to have that line sort of at least start this way. We can have our stop line somewhere down in here. You know, the stop lines, like when you come to the road, you see that stop. That answer?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, Kyle, in that bump between Spring Street and Bluff, is that gonna be cut back?
That between like this,
That-
between State and Bluff, like right here?
Yeah,
Yeah, this is the whole purpose, Lucas is up there as well, is we're gonna push this back this way and it'll hopefully allow us to grade this, so you see a little better.
you got this turning off of State, or off of State onto State Street.
Yeah.
You really gotta stick your nose out there now to see if somebody's.
But hopefully in this whole construction thing, at the planning commission, meeting, one of my biggest concerns is when you come up that corner now, you look left down the hill, you see like five, you see a utility pole, and you see like 4 or 5 signs.
Yeah.
And to me, that's as much of a problem right now,
Yeah.
because you're dodging the utility pole and the signs.
Yes.
And a couple of them will come down when the 119 construction is done, because 2 of them are for detours for the 119.
Yeah, right.
Well, that'll help a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I like the plan. I think, Bill's suggestion to carry the concrete a little farther up the hill. That makes sense.
We'll tag that along.
Yeah. Do it in van, I don't see how much more it costs, because that waffling was bad.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, really,
everyone happy?
I could have sworn the waffle was worse today.
Well, it is getting worse because, you know, all the rerouted traffic is
It's coming down.
coming down there and you got probably more heavier vehicles. So,
That's why I'm not donating.
Well, and I'm just gonna get to that next. So,
You're not-
and, well, no, they want to contribute $32,000. The one thing with MDOT, which maybe we can come back to whether or not we want to accept that money, is that you have to follow MDOT specs. And with those specs comes all the signage that you have to put out for detours, et cetera, which can add increased money. So we might be getting money from them, but might have to pay a little bit. It might be a little more, the bids might come a little bit higher. So it might be a wash based on, because MDOT specs, they're a little more stringent than our. So I think that's something we're gonna have to look in. They're gonna send us a contract that we would of course sign to accept their money. And so we want to review those to make sure that it's not gonna drive up our costs. If it is, then I would recommend that we just don't do it, because $32,000 is very insignificant if we have to increase.
it's not a huge.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I'll come back on that one. That one doesn't, you don't need to approve that in order to approve the project, but it would be nice to have that money, but if it's gonna make the costs go up of the project, then. Just like we did the project out here, the tunnel back in 2019, they had to also, approve whatever contractor we select, they have to be, has to be run by MDOT as well. So sometimes some contractors don't bid on MDOT projects because they don't want to follow their specs, so it might narrow the pool of contractors that apply. So yes, undecided on the money from MDOT yet.
All right.
Motion, I make a motion to authorize the city to prepare final plans for the plan as presented this evening. State Street. Rebuild from Summit to Bluff. Or Summit to 119.
With the added stipulation of the concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Here down better.
That's another part.
Item 3E is our substation real estate agreement, open and closed session. I think most of this will be in closed session. Of course, we do have a tentative agreement, well, not tentative, we do have a draft agreement that we've been going back with Mr. Everard and Mrs. Kelleher and their attorney, along with Jim Raymer, working on the details. I think we made a lot of progress, so we do have some things to talk about in closed session, but David is here, and I don't know if you want to say anything at all, but before we go into closed session, but you do have a copy of the agreement and I gave to you, so it's up to you, David. You don't have to say that. I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
Dave Ever, 2727 Bedford. I just want to say that we've worked quite a way through the process. We have about a 78-page document that covers almost everything that needs to be accomplished. And we're in the final phase of making a rather significant contribution to the grid in its stability and its longevity and ability to feed the city, plus a considerable aesthetic advantage to the city for eliminating a number of power lines, and getting it out of the city. So, good job, guys. Thank you.
Any other public comment? If not, we have some verbiage for our closed session.
I do, Mr. Mayor. We would need a motion that the council meet in closed session under section 8D of the Open Meetings Act, specifically under section 8D to consider the purchase of real property up to the time an option to purchase that property is obtained.
Make said motion.
I'll second it.
Kathy Macho.
Yes.
Matt Mugera. Matt.
Yes.
Jamie Melky.
Yes.
Michael Behrman.
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Enter closed session at 7:45.
I forgot to say this at the beginning. We have some signs creeping in the right of way, and Josh is gonna go out tonight and move them back. We're not gonna take them and confiscate them. But we had a complaint today and I did notice some signs, so Josh is gonna be on sign control tonight. So just to warn everybody, we're not issuing anybody tickets, we're just gonna pull them and put them back. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
approximately 8:13.
Okay, so we are back in open session. We'll open the doors for.
How do you decide what order to call people?
We are
What?
back in open
He just
session.
likes to vary.
You're not supposed to call the same order every time.
How do you?
I don't. Whoever I look at, and then I'll
Your
jump
jacket.
here and work my way to the middle.
So do we have anything to report to the public for the agreement? I think I would just say that at this point, we are still working on finalizing.
Yeah.
Trying to finalize agreement, and we hopefully will be back on October 21st with a review
Okay,
of the terms.
okay.
Did we not get a close session?
I think so.
What's
Yeah.
the topic on the close session?
Zoning code ballot. Legal
Will there be a
opinion.
decision at the end of the public hearing?
There may be.
I mean, Friday.
I can't say for sure, but there may be.
Okay,
Thanks, John.
thank you, John.
All right, so we need language to go into closed session to discuss a attorney opinion.
Whenever you're ready, Nick.
Yep.
Okay, we would need a motion that the council meet in closed session under section 8H of the Michigan Open Meetings Act, specifically under section 8H to consider the written opinion of the city attorney as to issues arising with respect to the current referendum on ordinance 439. Said written opinion being exempt from disclosure by the Freedom of Information Act, section 13(1)(h).
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, second,
Okay. Matt Bulgira,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Michael Behrman,
Yes.
Terry Macho.
yes.
And Jamie Melky.
Yes.
Motion carried. Closed section number 2 at 8:50.
All right.
We entered open session at 8:44 PM. John, it's cold.
I hope you brought a book to read, John.
The whole world on my phone.
Oh, that's okay.
All right, coming out of closed session, I will read a statement, and then that the city council, I believe, would agree and support. The statement is that city council has received an attorney-client privileged opinion from the city attorney on the effects of the zoning code referendum ballot question on zoning in the city, but council will not act on that opinion until after results of the referendum have been determined and finalized. Does council agree?
Yeah.
That's the-
Yes.
Good language.
Yes,
Yes.
okay.
I think we can go on to city manager's report.
Be excited.
I forgot to do this. Some things that we should know is Michigan's Earned Sick Time Act will require the city to provide sick time for part-time employees, which is not a huge deal because it's like 1 hour for 30 hours work. But the bigger thing is it may also require the city to reward employees earn paid time off. So we're looking at that. We're looking to see, because right now we do paid time off, but since they're requiring sick time, we might have to restructure some of our union agreement language. But we're still looking into that, so
We can fix that.
we can fix that, but it's just something you should be aware that we might have to reopen negotiations. We did receive 2 FOIA requests related to the zoning referendum and the ballot issue. We responded to those. We did receive a letter from the attorney from We Love Harbor Springs about the zoning code ballot initiative. And
FOIA request.
we did receive 1 FOIA request was for all documents related to the zoning ballot fact sheet that I sent out in early September.
Oh, right.
And then the other one was related to the petition signatures sheet, who Nick
Oh, yeah,
gave,
yeah, yeah.
gave that to, yeah. Then the newsletter has a bunch of other updates that I think were pretty imperative. We did make a new hire for the parks maintenance position. He's building a house, it's almost done on Harbor Street. Yeah, he's your neighbor, yeah, he's a
Great.
great guy.
Great guy.
He's from Canada, but he does have his green card, so he's allowed to work here.
There you
Website activity going strong. As you can tell, some of the documents and web pages that are of interest to people tend to be zoning and RRC. 326 people are subscribed to our email notices, so that's great. I mean, we have 300, that's how many people. I think it's been 3 years, 2.5, 3 years we've had this, and we have a lot of people signed up to receive email communications, which I think has been wonderful. TextMyGov is going well. Social media is out there, so all that's good. You know the results of the planning commission meeting and the Bluff Stability Committee meeting. We talked about those tonight. Didn't have any manager meetings or events of note because I was on vacation at a conference last week as well, so a whole lot of meetings going on. So that is that. Is there anything you'd like to know, discuss? There's a DDA and Harbor Commission meeting this week as well as RRC. Parks have been moved to, yes, the second, so yeah.
Oh, Rachel's.
Well, because Rachel is part of the
Excited
little,
about that.
she's part of little Trevor's.
Oh, right.
Leadership.
I
Once a
was to
month.
make it so I didn't have 2 meetings back to back,
Oh,
and then it
Yes, she.
messed it up.
Yeah. And there's a super authority meeting after this day, if anyone wants to go.
Oh, that's okay.
yeah, you two are supposed to report on that. But I don't ever go to those.
Thank you. That is something that we will have to discuss depending on what happens come November. I mean, I don't think it said mayor has to be the appointee. I think it has to be a member of the community. But I'll look that up.
Right.
Well, because Tim was our representative for a while.
But also the mayor was still on there.
Yes, and so yeah, it was just interesting.
So now we've got David LaMarche
Yes.
Yeah.
as a citizen, so I have to read the bylaws to see if it is the mayor, it is the mayor. Or an appointee,
I don't think it has to be the mayor.
somebody on this table.
Yeah, because Jeff James did it. I traded him
Right, you're right.
Okay.
sewer for zoning.
Sounds great.
All right, anything else?
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Okay. For the public record, minutes.
I got it.
All right, well, I think that's where we're at.
Any new or old business?
Oh, no. Sorry, I was giggling and.
Okay. I don't know exactly how to do this. But I think we should, pass an ordinance that political signs can't go out till October 1st.
Well, that would be part of the sign, that could be a suggestion you have, because we are reviewing, I believe at the planning, the DBA to sign, the sign ordinance.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Jim, you'd have to do some research to see if that's workable.
If you can.
We can incorporate
But I
that.
think that a time frame. Should
Yeah,
it be
like 30
X
days
amount of
before the
days
election.
before the election?
Yeah.
Because.
There's like
overall,
primaries.
Yeah, maybe 30 days before. an
30
election.
days.
Because it's really, I mean, this year is particularly. It's really a eyesore in our community.
And then just a quick recommendation. If you're gonna pick a time, 30 days, 20 days. 40 days is usually what happens. That's when the ballots are here. 40 days prior to election day. Doesn't mean we couldn't do what we want, but. I don't
No,
know.
that's a very good point, so people are already voting at,
Oh, yeah.
people are voting earlier and earlier, so.
We get the ballots 40 days prior to the election.
Okay, so that would be a good time frame to look at.
I should look at that then.
We'll have,
Private property, like, I think the mobile home park doesn't allow them up until 30 days before an election. And some, yeah, I've had some. But it's a short time period before.
one of the questions though, and Jeff and Jim and John Agalangeli will have to research this a little more and talk about it more, is that signs have to be content neutral, so you can't regulate, you
Right.
can't say political signs.
Yeah.
It has to be.
So like no contractor could put a sign out, nobody could.
Yeah, so that's gonna be the problem.
Yeah.
So what you could say is you could only have one sign on your property, one sign on your property residential until this date, when you're allowed to have X amount of signs. That would mean that you could still have your for sale sign on your property. Or you could have technically one political sign on your property, but you couldn't have, just because the state, the law of the land is you can't regulate content.
That would be enforceable, I think.
Yeah, okay, that you can have a limit of how many until a certain.
Because people put out graduation, like my senior.
Yeah, those are nice.
When the roofers do roofs, they put a sign out, that kind of stuff for a couple weeks or. Yeah.
That's a way to approach it.
That would
One
be a
way.
way to-
I'm sure there might be others, but that's the only thing.
Congratulations, it's a girl.
Yeah. Right. Like, yeah. That would be a good way to handle it, though.
If you have twins, and one's a girl and one's a boy,
Put
then
them
you'd
on
already.
each side.
Or get two really small.
You know,
I know where we're going.
All right.
Meeting adjourned.